I absolutely love the new Galaxy Z Fold 8 form factor and its compact design, but coming from the S26 Ultra, I did notice a few shortcomings, including the lack of a proper telephoto camera. The new Fold 8 design is really interesting. When folded, the phone is noticeably smaller than the Galaxy S26 Ultra. On the back, it has two cameras, a wide and an ultra wide. On the side, you will find the volume rockers and the power button, which also works as a fingerprint scanner. At the bottom, there is a USB-C port, and on the front, you get a 5.5-inch cover display. You can then unfold the phone to access the large 7.6-inch inner display. It has a 4:3 aspect ratio, which makes it a very interesting option for replacing your Kindle. There is also a selfie camera on the right side of the inner display. The S26 Ultra has a more traditional design with four cameras on the back, the power button, and the volume rockers on the side, an under-display fingerprint scanner, and a large 6.9-inch rectangular display. The Fold 8 is noticeably smaller and also lighter than the Ultra. At only 201 grams, it is around 6% lighter than the 214 grams S26 Ultra. The Fold is also only marginally thicker than the Ultra when folded. The Fold's cover screen is noticeably shorter than the display on the Ultra, but at the same time, it is slightly wider. I find it quite comfortable to use when one-handed, although a lot of online content isn't really designed for this unusual aspect ratio. The S26 Ultra, of course, has a higher quality display than the Fold's cover screen. For one, the Fold doesn't have the same anti-reflective properties on its outer display. You also don't get the privacy display feature, which can be very useful if you are keeping secrets from your family and friends. The Fold's inner display is anti-reflective though, and I would even go as far as saying that it is almost as good as the display on the Ultra. The Fold 7.6 inner display 4:3 aspect ratio gives you plenty of options for multitasking. For example, when taking pictures, you can immediately see the results on the left side of the screen. Using two apps side by side also feels very natural on the Fold. You could be editing something in one app while still watching YouTube in the other. It can definitely make your meetings a little less boring. When watching YouTube, you can also read the comments without making the video incredibly small. That is something I always want to do on my Ultra, but the experience is nowhere near as comfortable. I also found reading books on the Fold's 4:3 display to be an absolute delight. In its normal orientation, you can view two pages next to each other, which also works very well with two-column articles. When I'm reading a regular book though, I usually rotate the phone and it gives me a surprisingly natural book-like experience. It could genuinely replace your Kindle, especially since it is lightweight and easy to hold with one hand. So overall, when it comes to design and display, I think the Fold easily wins, at least for me. I would happily trade the better display quality of the Ultra for the much larger screen on the Fold. The main drawback, however, is the lack of a proper telephoto camera compared to the Ultra. Ignoring the fact that the S26 Ultra has four cameras and the Fold only has two, the Fold doesn't even have a particularly good main camera. The main camera on the Fold is basically the same as what we see on the base S26 models. It has a smaller sensor and a lower megapixel count. This is Maria, the model of today's video, for reference, shot on a full-frame Sony camera. The first thing I noticed is that the Fold generally has a warmer tone, even though I used the same settings on both phones. For white balance, the Ultra has more yellow here, while the Fold has more magenta, and I personally prefer that. As long as you have enough light and the scene is flat, both of them can take amazing shots. But it's quite clear to me that the Fold has a weaker main camera. Here, for example, you can see that the amount of background blur you get is much stronger on the Ultra compared to the Fold. Of course, you can argue that portrait mode would solve that issue. Here's a picture of Yana, and I find both phones do a very similar job in this portrait shot. Generally though, as I said, in bright conditions, both should create more or less similar pictures. Even for videos, if we ignore the stronger bokeh on the S26 Ultra, the colors and general quality are more or less similar between both phones. The stabilization is also great on both of them, even in the normal stabilization mode, without trying the crazy 360 lock on the Galaxy. They also both offer 4K at 120 frames per second for slow motion and up to 8K native video recording. The second camera on the Fold is an ultra-wide one. In this ultra-wide picture, colors aside, the optical quality is very close, which is not surprising. The same goes for this picture. It is just interesting how different the colors are between these two phones, considering they are using the same hardware. It becomes a bit more interesting when we start to zoom in. Here at 3x zoom, the Galaxy is using optical zoom, while the Fold is using digital zoom. I would argue that at 3x zoom, the difference is negligible, considering the Ultra's 3x zoom camera is not that great. But then, moving to 5x zoom, everything changes. The Ultra has much better optical quality, stronger background blur, and simply produces a better photo. You can also use the telephoto lens in portrait mode on the Ultra to create really nice looking photos, but that's not possible on the Fold. You can also see in the 5x zoom that the Ultra's quality is much better than the Fold. If we zoom in further, like 10 times, the Ultra can still create a nice photo, while the Fold starts to lag behind. For the normal selfie camera, the Fold wins by having a wider focal length and a better camera sensor. But you can also use the cover screen as a viewfinder and use the main lens instead of the selfie camera. Low light is another area where the Ultra wins. The larger sensor can let in more light and the picture will turn out better. But we should also not exaggerate the whole thing. The Fold can still produce almost identical photos to the Ultra in many situations like this one. When it comes to performance, they are both using the latest Snapdragon 8 Elite Generation 5 for Galaxy, but of course the phones have different internals and cooling. I didn't test it thoroughly yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Fold gets hotter under similar conditions, as it has less space for chipsets and all the internals. Battery life should also be more or less similar between the two. The S26 Ultra has a 5000 mAh battery, while the Fold 8 has a 4800 mAh one. There are a few other differences between the two phones. The most notable one is that the S26 Ultra has a S Pen, which is something I would miss dearly if I switch to the Fold 8. Overall, would I actually make the switch? The answer is yes, at least for a reasonable amount of time. I plan to use the Fold 8 as my main phone. I'll be doing more in-depth testing though, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see those videos. I love that I can easily fit this phone into both my front and back pockets without it poking out. I also love the large inner screen, especially for reading books, but I already know I'm going to miss the telephoto camera and the S Pen for the foreseeable future. You may also consider the Z Fold 8 Ultra instead of these two. If you want to see how the Z Fold Ultra compares to the Z Fold 8, you can watch this video next. Thanks for tuning into Tecmo, and I will see you in the next one.